So a massive takeover story came out today on Sir Jim Ratcliffe's side, and unlike other takeover stories we've got 4, 5, 6 different sources confirming this story. And this is that Sir Jim is willing to change his bid to just be a minority stake and allow the Glazers to stay at Manchester United with full control of the club. Now, this could be the worst thing that ever happened to United, someone allowing the Glazers to stay. This is the worst case scenario with the takeover, a scenario that I didn't think would happen because Sir Jim's sources have been saying before this that they wouldn't do anything to give the Glazers power. Sir Jim's reasoning for this is please the Glazers for now, do a minority stake, and then in a few years he can get the majority stake. Will Qataris respond to this? Will the Glazers even accept this? Because he's reconstructing his bid, he's going for minority bid, but at the end of the day, he's not giving the Glazers the $6 billion they want. And even if he does give them the money to invest, they can't stay at the club much longer. We're going to get into this news, whether I think the Glazers would accept this bid or not, but also reports about the Qatari side. Are the Qataris going to respond to this? So let's get into the news. And look, smash that like button if you're like me and you want the Qataris, you don't want the Glazers, you don't want Sir Jim, you want a full sale and you want the Qataris, smash the like. But it was said Sir Jim is considering buying a minority stake in Manchester United rather than taking control in his latest offer. Ratcliffe proposed to the Glazers to acquire part of their shares in equal of up to 25%. So Ratcliffe originally went for 70% of the club or 69% of the club, and then he changed his offer to 50% of the club, allowing the Glazers to keep 19% of their shares because he knew he couldn't outbid Qatar, outmatch Qatar for 70%. So he changed it to 50% and let the Glazers have the other 20%. And now he's changing it to 25%. Why is he doing this? Because he's desperate for Manchester United. He doesn't care about the fans, and he knows that he can't outbid Qatar for 100% because he has to borrow the money. He knows he cannot compete with Qatar. So the only way he can is by basically sucking up to the Glazers and giving them everything they want. It was said Sir Jim's Ineos sports vehicle has proposed to the controlling Glazer family a deal that would see acquiring chunks of both their shares and stock publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange in equal portion. There's obviously been a problem with Sir Jim. Obviously, the Class A shareholders have had a problem because Sir Jim was only originally going to be buying out the Glazers. His new proposal was a minority stake that would buy out basically an equal amount of shares on both sides, divided by the 100%. This story was then confirmed by TalkSport, saying that Ratcliffe is now considering buying a minority stake in Manchester United to conclude business quickly. Now, a big part of me thinks, could this be a PR spin? Could this be a story that's been released out to try and get the Qataris to up their bid? There's definitely a possibility in that, but I will tell you this for a fact. Sir Jim is reconstructing his bid. We've known that for a while. We've known he's had talks for a while, and he is reconstructing his bid. He's reconstructing his bid with the goal of, breaking the deadlock, essentially. He can't up his bid, he can't reassess his bid, he hasn't got the money, he can only reassess his bid and allow the Glazers what they want, which is power and control. That's the only way that he can beat out the Qataris. Now, you've got to remember this, he's not giving the Glazers the $6 billion they want, and there's still a feeling deep down that the Glazers ultimately want to sell the club for $6 billion. So even though Sir Jim is reconstructing his bid and going in with this new bid, that doesn't necessarily mean that Sir Jim will win. This is what happened the last 2 times we're in this situation. There's been 2 times where we've been in this situation, and that was about March, April time last year, where we kept being told that Sir Jim was going into the final stage. His bid was so much better than Qatar's, and what did the Qataris do? They put in another bid. We were told by all these sources that Sir Jim's bid was the favourable one. They were going in most advanced talks with Sir Jim. The Qataris up their bid. And then we got told the Glazers prefer Sir Jim's offer. This, that, the Qataris up their bid. What's not to say that Sir Jim is doing this, but the Glazers are making sure everybody knows Sir Jim is doing this. This report's being leaked everywhere, so everyone knows Sir Jim's doing this. They're going to start going along the lines of this deal is really close, this deal is really close. Sir Jim's going to get a minority stake to maybe get Qatar to just up their bid even more. It could just be a big tactic to get Qatar to up their bid, because the last 2 times reports have come out that Sir Jim is leading, or Sir Jim has changed his bid, or Sir Jim's bid's better, and now it's coming out that he's reconstructing his bid to break the deadlock. Qatar then responded by upping their bid. Could this be a tactic by the Glazers? It was said that Ineos's position remains that they want to control Man United. That means if they do seek a minority stake, it will be with the view of eventual control, most likely by 2026. This is the only worrying thing. I think the Glazers know they ultimately have to sell the club, and a minority investment can allow them to stay a little bit longer because they don't have the money to really stay at the club much longer, and then they would be brought out. That is what is believed Sir Jim is preparing to do. However, this again could be getting leaked because it's the only realistic story. Why would Sir Jim give the minority stake? Why would Sir Jim give them X amount of money to spend on the stadium when he has no control, when he doesn't even have the money to give them upfront for the club without borrowing it? Well, maybe Sir Jim's game plan is let them stay for 2 years, give them full control for 2 years, and then in 6 years I can buy them out and become the owner. Maybe that's Sir Jim's plan, or maybe they're leaking that information because they actually want to scare the Qataris into thinking, okay, they might do a deal with Sir Jim because that would actually say they can stay until for another 6 years, or they can stay till 2026. Now, Mike Keegan is probably the best source when it comes to takeover news, and he said this. He said Sir Jim is considering ditching his bid to take over Man United in favour of buying a minority stake, which would leave the Glazer family in control of the club. Okay, this story was then confirmed by Mike Keegan. So the story that Sir Jim is changing his bid to a minority stake, which would allow the Glazers to stay, which would please the Glazers, I believe is true. Now, Mike Keegan, among many sources, is speaking of it. While Mike Keegan did say the Qataris are still 100% keen on getting United and reassured us that the Qataris would do everything on their side, he did say that Ratcliffe's new offer would likely bring in a figure close to 1.5 billion for the Glazers, which is well short of the 6 billion valuation. It would provide much needed funds to revamp decaying Old Trafford and rebuild, and a rebuild would not be possible. Now, I'm not too worried about the story, in all honesty. I think Sir Jim is reconstructing his bid. He is trying minority stake. I think Sir Jim is not a Man United fan, because if he was a Man United fan, he wouldn't even consider giving the Glazers the possibility to stay. And I think Sir Jim has just lost the complete trust of the fan base. I mean, most of the fan base were Qatarin, but I think the whole fan base will be Qatarin now if this is Sir Jim Ratcliffe's plan. But Sir Jim knows he can't beat Qatar. He knows he won't beat Qatar to United. He knows he can't outbid Qatar to United. And Sir Jim is all about pleasing the Glazers, giving the Glazers what they want, because that's the only way he can beat Qatar. Now, I'm not ultimately worried, because at the end of the day, the Glazers want 6 billion. So Jim will never be able to give them 6 billion. He can give them 1.5 billion, what they need to invest in the stadium for now, to stay on for another year or two, but that he won't give them the money needed for a much needed rebuild. So any money that Sir Jim brings in isn't going on signing new players. It will be on doing up Old Trafford and doing up the stadium and doing up facilities, which is desperately needed. But Qatar was going to do that anyway on top of investing in the squad. So Sir Jim, is putting in a minority stake offer worth 1.5 billion. Maybe the Glazers will accept it because it gives them the power to stay at the club even longer. And we know their main goal was always minority stake. But at the same time, it's short of the 6 billion. They're not getting 6 billion from Sir Jim. Could they go along with this? Could they play along with this to try and scare the Qataris into putting a new bid? Ben Jacobs did say Qatari's biggest fear isn't Sir Jim Ratcliffe, it's the fact that the Glazers would do something to stay and not sell. Could the Glazers be putting out stories that they're thinking of doing this and staying at the club to scare the Qataris into upping their bid? Absolutely. The Qataris have upped their bid twice, and both times the Qataris have upped their bid, we've had news like this come out about Sir Jim changing his bid, or Sir Jim upping his bid, or Sir Jim's bid being in the lead. Mike Keegan said the Qataris are 100% committed, and if they are, I think they'll up their bid if they think this bid is serious. It's a reconstruction of the bid. So Jim is willing to let the Glazers stay, which I disagree with, but he's not. At the end of the day, he's not giving them the 6 billion they want. So who knows if the Glazers would even accept this? But Ben Jacobs said some interesting things. But before I get into what Ben Jacobs says, I want to get into the rest of Mike Keegan's story. And he said that Sir Jim Ratcliffe's offer would see him take an equal portion of A and B shares. Some holders of A shares, which are publicly traded, have flagged concerns over previous proposals for Ratcliffe to make a majority bid, but buying the more powerful B shares from the 6 Glazer siblings. Potential legal challenges have been raised as a prospect should route be taken. So again, basically, he's saying that Ratcliffe would be very careful when he got a minority stake. He would make sure he'd get an equal portion of Class A and Class B shares so he's not sued, which is what the rumours last week were suggesting, that he was reconstructing his bid to basically not upset the Class A shareholders so he didn't get sued. Maybe the reconstructing of his bid, they didn't say he was changing price, but maybe the reconstructing of his bid was this all along. It was to put in a minority investment bid in. We know he's been reconstructing his bid for a while, but it looks like his reconstruction wasn't, doing something to please the Class A shareholders. It was actually completely changing his bid to 25%. Now, despite Sir Jim Ratcliffe obviously doing anything and everything he can to stay to become the next owner of United, including doing anything that would allow the Glazers to stay. After saying he's a Man United fan, I'm not overly worried while the Qataris are still in the race. Phil said this: why would the Glazers want to remain in control in the present if they're going to be phased out over the next few years, assuming that's what happens? Because it's basically said that Sir Jim Ratcliffe's plan is to put a minority investment in now and eventually buy them out. They obviously see a cash grab in the near future and want to make sure nothing gets in their way from pushing United in that direction. When trying to understand why the Glazers do anything, the answer is always the same: money. So again, I don't see any value in the Glazers letting Sir Jim come in. I don't. I see absolutely no value in the Glazers letting Sir Jim come in as a minority investment and giving them 1.5 billion. I don't know why the Glazers would do that. I don't know how it benefits them. The club isn't making money to allow them to have dividends, this and that. The only way that the Glazers accept this is if the Glazers believe in 2 years' time they're going to get 10 billion for United, loads more money, and they're using Sir Jim's money as a stepping stone to let them sell the club for even more in, I don't know, 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 4 years' time, 5 years' time. For me, Sir Jim's bid is 1.5 billion for 25%. 1.5 billion for 25%, which essentially equates to 6 billion for 100%, which is what the Glazers want. It allowed them to do the stadium and the reconstructure that they need to do, but they can't do, they don't have the money to. It does allow the Glazers to stay on at Manchester United for another 2 years. But at the end of the day, I don't know why they'd want to stay. I don't know why the Glazers would want to stay when the club is in the mess that it is, unless they think that they're going to get way more money in the future. And they want to stay on for another few years. It's either a game to get the Qataris to up their bid, either the Glazers believe they'll make more money this way. I don't know what it is. But we know Sir Jim Ratcliffe in summary, and this video has probably been repetitive and not totally clear, but again, no one knows what's going on with the takeover. But Sir Jim has reconstructed his bid and is changing to minority stake. So it's one of two things. He's either accepting defeat, and this is his way to try and challenge that. He knows he can't beat Qatar, accepting his defeat. This is his way to kind of challenge that, put one last minute offer in with the Glazers to see if they change their minds, see if they attempt to buy a minority stake, which they might be because that's what they've been trying to do for years, and they've only recently decided they're open to a full sale as well. You know, or it could be a negotiation tactic to get Qatar to up their bid. The Glazers have been leaving Qatar in silence for months, and we know they've been leaving Qatar in silence for months because all they want is Qataris to up their bid. They want 6 billion. They know the Qataris have 6 billion. They've left it quiet for months trying to get the Qataris to up their bid. Could they be going along with this to get the Qataris to up their bid? Most definitely, because the last 2 times stories have come out that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is close or Sir Jim Ratcliffe is doing this and that, the Qataris have up their bid. There's so many ways we can look at this. It could be that the Sir Jim is giving the Glazers what they want, which is a minority investment, which is probably what the Glazers want because they're greedy, even though I don't think it makes any financial sense for them. They probably believe they'll make the most money that way. It could be a negotiation tactic. It could be many things. But one thing we all know is that the Glazers must go. The worst case scenario that can happen is Sir Jim allowing the Glazers to stay. Sir Jim knows he's going to get a load of stick if he does anything that allows the Glazers to have power. And he'll be allowing the Glazers to have power, which is the worst case scenario. So I don't even know why Sir Jim is doing this. I know he's desperate for United, but if you're allowing the Glazers to have power, you're ruining your brand. You're trusting the Glazers with your money. They might sell you out in the future. Again, I'm going to wait until more developments come out on this story tomorrow. And I'm sorry that this is a long, maybe slightly repetitive video. But for me, either the Qataris up their bid and they do something soon, which apparently they're going to do, or maybe it could be going to Sir Jim, because this minority investment might be tempting for the Glazers. The worst thing that can happen is someone allowing the Glazers to stay, even if he has the long-term plan of buying them out in 6 years, allowing them to stay, giving them that automation in the first place is the worst thing. But I think it's true. He changed his bid from 70% to 50%. I think he can change from 50 to 25%. So Jim is willing to do anything to acquire the club. Now we've got to hope that Sheikh Yassim is willing to do the same, because I can't have the Glazers staying. Smash a like, smash a subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. See you next time, and bye.